Imagine my shock when I opened the door and saw a woman I'd never met before looking at me like she owned the place. But here's the real kicker. She was there to kick me out. She stood there, bold as anything, telling me that the house I grew up in now belonged to my ex-husband. And her. But what she didn't see coming? I had something that would bring their entire plan crashing down. And when she realized it, oh, you should have seen her face. Stick around because this story only gets better. I wasn't expecting visitors that day. It was a quiet afternoon in London, and I was enjoying the peace while sorting through some things in the house I had grown up in. A beautiful Victorian home that had belonged to my father, Edward. The scent of Earl Grey tea still lingered in the air when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a woman I had never seen before, yet she was looking at me as if she already owned the place. She was dressed in an immaculate designer coat, her blonde hair tied up in an elegant bun, and her nails so perfectly manicured that they looked like they had never touched anything as simple as washing a teacup. She radiated arrogance. "You must be Alice," she said with a cold smile. "I'm Victoria, Richard's wife." My heart pounded. Richard. Just hearing my ex-husband's name was enough to bring back bitter memories. I hadn't seen Richard in over a year, not since we finalized our divorce. But what was his new wife doing at my door? "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Victoria crossed her arms and let out an impatient sigh, as if she were about to explain something painfully obvious to me. "I'm here to settle this matter once and for all. This house," she gestured broadly, glancing around like she was already imagining where to put her expensive furniture, "now belongs to Richard and me." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity of it was absurd. "You must be joking," I replied. "This house has always been in my family. My father bought it over 40 years ago and left it to me in his will." "That's what you think," Victoria said, pulling a folder from her handbag. She flipped through the pages and held out a document with an official stamp. "Here's the proof that this property now belongs to Richard." I grabbed the paper, my eyes scanning the words rapidly. It was a deed of ownership, but something felt off. I had never signed anything, never sold the house. How is this even possible? "This can't be right," I muttered, trying to process what was happening. Victoria smirked, clearly enjoying my confusion. "I didn't expect you to take this easily, but the facts are the facts. Richard has a rightful claim to this house. And honestly, I'm here to make things easier for you. If you leave without making a fuss, we can handle this civilly. Otherwise, we can take this to court. But I warn you, we have proof to back our claim." My anger flared. Handle this civilly? There was no way I was leaving, let alone handing over my family's home without a fight. "Then take it to court," I shot back, feeling my confidence surge. "But I promise you, you're not going to like what you find." For a brief second, Victoria's expression changed. A flicker of hesitation flashed in her eyes before she quickly regained her composure. "Suit yourself," she said, adjusting her coat as she stepped down the stairs. But Richard isn't a man who loses easily. She turned back one last time, giving me a look filled with smug certainty. "Soon, this house will be ours." And with that, she walked away, leaving me standing there with a suspicious document in my hands and a storm of thoughts racing through my mind. The moment Victoria walked away, I felt my legs tremble beneath me. I clutched the document tightly, my mind racing through all the possibilities. Could this be real? Had Richard somehow found a legal loophole to take what was rightfully mine? No. I knew deep down that this house was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I closed the door behind me and took a deep breath. The familiar scent of old wood and freshly brewed tea filled the air, a comforting reminder that this wasn't just a house, it was my home. I walked slowly through the living room, my fingers trailing along the stone fireplace where my father, Edward, used to sit every night, reading his favorite books. The shelves were still filled with his old collections, some with his handwriting scribbled in the margins. This house held too many memories to simply be handed over to a man who had already caused me so much pain. My father always said that a home isn't just a place you live in, it's where you build a life. It was here that I took my first steps, where I celebrated birthdays, and where on rainy days my mother would make her famous stew. Even after she passed, my father kept the tradition alive, making sure this house always felt like a safe haven for us. Then came Richard. At first, he seemed perfect. Charming, caring, devoted. We met through mutual friends, and before I knew it, our relationship had progressed quickly. He knew how much this house meant to me, and at first, he seemed to respect that. But as the years passed, I noticed subtle changes. He would mention, almost jokingly, that the house was too big for me. Later, he suggested that we sell it and start fresh somewhere new. At the time, I thought he was just dreaming of a better future. But now I realize there had always been a hidden intention behind his words. Richard never accepted that this house belonged to me. And now he had finally found a way to try and take it. I couldn't let that happen. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of Thomas, my trusted lawyer and friend. "Thomas, I need your help. It's urgent." I didn't know how Richard had gotten his hands on those fake documents, but one thing was certain. I was going to fight with everything I had to make sure my house remained mine. I was still holding the phone when Thomas answered. On the other end. "Alice? What happened?" He sounded concerned. "Richard is trying to steal my house. His new wife showed up here with documents claiming the property belongs to him." There was a tense silence. I knew Thomas was processing the information before responding. "That's impossible. I personally reviewed your father's will. This house was transferred directly to you." "Then how did he get these papers?" I asked, frustration boiling over. "Send me photos of everything. I need to take a look." I snapped a few pictures of the document and sent them to Thomas immediately. While waiting for his response, my heart pounded in my chest. Something was seriously wrong. I sat on the couch, staring at the walls filled with old photographs. My father, my mother, even childhood pictures of myself. This house wasn't just a piece of property. It was proof of my history, my life. My phone buzzed. Thomas had reviewed the documents. "Alice, there's something very suspicious here. The document has official seals, but some details don't match the public records. This could be forgery." A chill ran down my spine. Does this mean Richard is committing fraud? Exactly. But we need solid proof. I'm going to dig deeper, but in the meantime, don't say anything to him or his wife. If they realize you suspect something, they might try to cover their tracks. I agreed, feeling my anger grow. Richard was not going to get away with this. I decided to do some investigating of my own. I knew Richard had a history of shady business dealings, but I had never paid much attention before. Now, with a clear goal in mind, I started searching for information about him online, and what I found was even worse than I had imagined. He had been accused of real estate fraud years ago. Not officially charged, but there were sealed court records indicating he had tried to take properties from former partners. Some gave in, others fought back, but the pattern was clear. He would get close, gain their trust, and once the relationship ended, he would try to take their assets. My stomach turned. I wasn't going to be another victim on Richard's list. I grabbed my phone and texted Thomas. "We need to act fast." "He's done this before. I'm already on it. I'll gather documents proving your legal ownership of the house and get an expert to analyze these forged papers." I felt relieved knowing Thomas was on my side, but at the same time, I knew this battle was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling, as if I were being watched. The tension from the night before still lingered in the air, but I was determined not to let fear take over. After making a strong cup of coffee, I sat at the kitchen table and mentally reviewed everything I had learned about Richard. His behavior pattern was clear. He targeted women with assets, built a relationship of trust, and then tried to take what wasn't his. This time, I needed to be one step ahead. My phone buzzed. It was Thomas. "Alice, I've been analyzing the forged documents. They're well made, but there are discrepancies in the records and the notary's signature. That's enough to question their validity. Does that mean we can expose him?" "Yes, but we need more proof." I managed to get in touch with a lawyer who handled one of Richard's previous cases. He can help us understand his methods. With every new piece of information, my anger grew. Richard wasn't just an opportunist, he was a financial predator, and Victoria, his new wife, was probably part of the scheme. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. My heart pounded. I stood up slowly and walked toward the door. Peeking through the peephole, I saw none other than Victoria, once again wearing that smug expression, holding a folder of documents. I took a deep breath before opening the door. Can we talk? She smiled, but her tone was cold. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. After all, you're occupying a property that doesn't belong to you. My blood boiled. What do you want, Victoria? She lifted the folder and waved it slightly. Are you sure you want to fight for this house? We can. Settle this in a civilized manner. I know Richard wants to avoid conflict, and I'm sure you don't want to drag this into court either. I rolled my eyes. The audacity of this woman was incredible. Do you really think I'm going to fall for this ridiculous act? She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Listen, Alice, I'm just trying to save you some trouble. I know you have a strong emotional attachment to this house, but Richard has ways of getting what he wants. Why not make things easier? That was the moment I saw their real plan. They were trying to manipulate me, make me doubt my own rights, hoping I'd give up before fighting back. I crossed my arms and looked Victoria straight in the eye. Tell Richard that if he wants this house, he'll have to fight for it in court, and I guarantee he'll lose. She forced a smile and shrugged. If that's how you want it. But don't say I didn't warn you. As soon as Victoria left, I called Thomas immediately. They're bluffing. They know the documents are fake and are trying to make me back down before I gather evidence against them. Good. That means they're scared. Now it's our turn to strike. I was ready for war. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, but I was so focused on the situation that I could hardly concentrate on anything else. Every new day felt like a battle to stay calm and figure out the next step. Time was running out, and we couldn't afford to wait to take action. I knew Thomas was doing everything he could to gather evidence, but I also needed a stronger legal strategy. He suggested that I meet with a lawyer specializing in real estate fraud, and the idea seemed perfect. After all, I wasn't just facing Richard and Victoria, but a system that was trying to swallow me whole. The next day, I met with the lawyer, Dr. Miguel Almeida, at a local cafe in Lisbon. When I entered, I saw him sitting at a table in the back. Miguel was a serious man, with graying hair and an imposing posture, as if carrying years of experience in his field. I watched him for a moment before approaching. Dr. Almeida? I called. He looked up and smiled slightly. Alice, right? Let's get straight to the point. Thomas explained the basics of the situation to me. I sat down, and I started explaining everything I knew about Richard's attempt to take the house. I detailed the encounter with Victoria and the forged documents, and how I was feeling increasingly lost in all of this. Miguel listened attentively, and at the end, he paused, looking at me with a firm gaze. Alice, we have a chance, but we need to act quickly. These forged documents can't slip through unnoticed. What we need now are solid pieces of evidence showing that Richard was involved in creating these documents. We have to attack his weak point, the past. He seemed confident, and that gave me some hope, but it also made me anxious. Richard's past was full of details he was clearly trying to hide. It wouldn't be easy to uncover it all, but it was our only chance. How do we do that, Doctor? I asked, my voice tense. We need to find people who have dealt with him in the past. If we can find witnesses who can confirm his methods, that'll be a decisive blow. I'll start with field investigation. We'll look for someone who has been harmed by him before. I left the cafe with renewed determination, knowing the battle wouldn't be easy, but now I had a strong team by my side. However, a strange feeling lingered with me as I drove back home. Something told me that Richard wasn't going to give up that easily. The next day, the feeling of urgency only grew. I knew that any moment Richard could try something more drastic. He had already shown his true face when he tried to intimidate me with the idea of settling everything civilly, and now it was clear that he wasn't willing to back down easily. I needed to act, and act fast. Miguel, as promised, was digging into Richard's past. For now, I was alone at home, my mind swirling with thoughts. However, I couldn't help but wonder, how had Richard come this far without being exposed? What kind of connections did he have? Who else was involved? Then an idea struck me. I remembered a family friend, Dona Helena, a lady who had known my father since his youth. Dona Helena was always very observant, and she seemed to know everything that happened in our town. She had an incredible memory and was always in the loop with local gossip. If anyone knew something about Richard, it would surely be her. I went to Dona Helena's house, which was located in a traditional neighborhood in Lisbon, in the Alfama district. When I arrived, she greeted me with a warm hug and a welcoming smile. but she quickly noticed something was wrong. "Alice, dear, what's happened? You look worried." "Donna Helena, I need your help. I'm facing a problem with a man named Richard." She interrupted me before I could continue. "Richard? That name sounds familiar." I didn't know what to expect, but soon she began to tell a story that left me speechless. "This Richard. He has a very shady past, my dear. He was involved in suspicious business with an old friend of mine, Miguel Almeida." I froze. The name of the lawyer I had just met, Miguel Almeida, was connected somehow. Donna Helena continued. "They were business partners in a project that failed many years ago. Rumors said that after the bankruptcy, Richard began getting involved in real estate scams. He always targets women with assets and tries to manipulate them, Alice. Be careful." The revelation hit me like a bucket of cold water. I felt a growing rage, but also a sense of relief. Finally, I was beginning to understand who I was dealing with. But, Donna Helena, what can I do? How can I prove he's behind this fraud? Donna? Helena thought for a moment. "I think I can help you. I know some people who might know more about his shady dealings. Let's try to find that information and see how he operates. I'll make some calls." I thanked her immensely and left with a sense that, finally, the pieces were starting to fall into place. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore, and Richard seemed more vulnerable than ever. On the way back, a strange feeling lingered. I knew Richard wasn't just any man, but with what Donna Helena had told me, I realized he was far more dangerous than I had imagined. The consequences of this story could be much bigger than I had anticipated. I just didn't know how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets. The following days felt like an emotional roller coaster. With Donna Helena's help, we dug even deeper into Richard's past and his connections. She made some crucial calls, and soon we began to uncover information that brought us closer to understanding Richard's true nature. I knew that in order to defeat him, we needed more than just proof. We needed something personal, something that would strike him at his core. Richard wasn't just a fraudster. He had something to hide. Everything started to unravel when Donna Helena introduced me to one of Richard's old business associates, Mr. João Carvalho. He was a retired local businessman who, according to Donna Helena, had fallen victim to Richard's scam many years ago. João, now retired, was a simple man, but his memory was impeccable, and he soon confirmed everything Donna Helena and I had suspected. He told me, in detail, how Richard had manipulated a real estate deal between him and other investors, causing João to lose a large sum of money. João explained how, back then, Richard had seemed like an honest and trustworthy man, only to reveal his true nature later. He would use fake charm and persuasive speech to convince his partners to invest in shady projects. When things went wrong, Richard would disappear, leaving others to face the consequences. According to João, Richard was a master at hiding behind forged documents and dubious contracts. "I knew he was dangerous, but I never imagined he was this bold," João said, with a sorrowful look. "He's a manipulator, Alice, and you're doing well to confront him now, before he destroys more lives." The revelation hit me like a bucket of cold water. I felt an intense anger rise inside me, but at the same time, a sense of relief started to wash over me. Finally, I was starting to understand who I was dealing with. But Donna Helena, what can I do? How can I prove he's behind this fraud? Donna. Helena thought for a moment. "I think I can help you. I know some people who might know more about his shady dealings. Let's try to find that information and see how he operates. I'll make some calls." I thanked her immensely and left with a sense that, finally, the pieces were starting to fall into place. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore, and Richard seemed more vulnerable than ever. On the way back, a strange feeling lingered. I knew Richard wasn't just any man, but with what Donna Helena had told me, I realized he was far more dangerous than I had imagined. The consequences of this story could be much bigger than I had anticipated. I just didn't know how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets. The days were more intense than ever. I knew that by walking into Richard's office, armed, with the revelations of his true nature, I was about to turn the tables. The adrenaline took over as he tried to maintain his arrogant posture, but there was something in his eyes that didn't lie. He was beginning to lose control. I stared him down, unwavering, and began to lay out everything I knew. Every piece of information I had gathered from Donna Helena, João, and even Miguel, the lawyer who had become an ally, dropped like a bombshell. Richard, who had always held the upper hand, now found himself powerless against the evidence I had. I was no longer alone. The pieces had fallen into place, and I had something he couldn't hide anymore. You knew my father was involved in a real estate scam that you orchestrated with Miguel Almeida, I asked, letting the tension linger. He tried to deflect the conversation, but my resolve made him stop. His face turned pale, the signs of nervousness were evident, and for the first time since I met him, he seemed fragile. Richard was not the invincible man he had portrayed himself to be. His mask was slipping. Alice, you don't know what you're talking about. Richard's attempt to defend himself sounded like a poor excuse, I pressed on. I was not going to let him intimidate me. I knew this fight was about my life, my father's inheritance, and the truth. I know, Richard. I know what you did with all those forged documents. You never expected anyone to find out about this, did you? You used my father, manipulated him in a vile way. But now, the game is over. The anger was palpable, but I stayed focused. He was cornered, and no matter how hard he tried to dodge, the evidence was irrefutable. He started to panic, mumbling incoherent words, trying to justify himself, but it was too late. Everything you've built with lies, Richard, is crumbling. You thought you could control everything with the power you have, but here I am, bringing to light everything you tried to hide. At this moment, he knew there was nowhere to run. He tried one last move, offering a deal, a kind of peace, but the truth could no longer be ignored. I know you want me to back down, to accept some ridiculous offer so you can save yourself. But you don't have control over me anymore. What you did was dirty, and now you will pay for it. With that, the battle for my father's inheritance turned into a war for truth and justice. I wasn't going to let Richard get away with this, no matter the cost. He underestimated me, but I was determined to go all the way. He was being exposed, and it destroyed him inside. The police were called, and the authorities began investigating his fraudulent actions. The forged contracts, the manipulation in business deals, everything began to be carefully scrutinized. Richard was finally paying for the damage he had done to my family and so many others. When the officers arrived at his house to conduct a search, I saw the panic in his eyes. He knew it was over. His arrogant stance, which had been his trademark for so long, transformed into sheer terror. Now he was facing the consequences of his actions. I was exhausted, but at the same time, a sense of victory filled me. The fight that seemed impossible was finally coming to an end. I had confronted Richard and won. He had no more masks to hide behind. The truth was out in the open for everyone to see. I knew there was still much to be done. My father's inheritance needed to be protected, and there was so much more I had to learn about his legacy. But, at that moment, I knew I was ready to face the future, knowing that justice had been served. Now that we've reached the end of this journey, with the truth finally uncovered and justice served, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in Alice's shoes? I know that many of you throughout the story probably felt outraged by Richard's actions and maybe even frustrated by the manipulations. But what if you were the one facing this situation? How would you handle the pressure, the betrayals all around you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know what you think about this story and how you believe Alice should have acted during key moments of her battle. Your opinions mean a lot to me, and let's keep the conversation going. Also, don't forget to like the video and share it with others who might need to hear this story. I know a lot of you related to Alice's struggle, and you may feel like this video could inspire others too. Now I want to ask you, do you believe that justice always prevails in the end? Or do you think, in some cases, lies can hide for much longer? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more videos like this, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you won't miss anything. Oh, and if you haven't watched the previous video, click here and check it out. I'm sure you'll be surprised. Go ahead, share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going.